The crystalline ships of the Vex Thori fleet emerged from hyperspace like shards of ice catching sunlight. Their arrival marked humanity's first contact with an advanced alien civilization, and Captain Sarah Chen couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and apprehension as she stood on the bridge of the UES Artemis. "They're requesting permission to observe our standard defense readiness exercises," Lieutenant Rodriguez reported from his communication station. Their chief military observer, Cathorn, says it's customary during first contact protocols. Sarah straightened her uniform and nodded. "Grant permission. Let's show them what Earth's defense forces can do." The exercise began with a standard demonstration of Earth's military capabilities. Training squads deployed across the lunar surface, their movements precise and coordinated. As projectile weapons and guided missiles arced through space, Sarah noticed the alien observers' expressions through the video feed. Their crystalline features twisted into what she recognized as barely concealed amusement. "Captain," Cawthorn's melodic voice came through the communication channel. "We notice your weapons seem to have significant deviation from their intended trajectories. Perhaps there are computational errors in your targeting systems." Sarah caught Lieutenant Rodriguez trying to hide a smile. "No errors, Observer Cawthorn. Each shot is performing exactly as intended." The alien's crystalline head tilted slightly. "But your projectiles are missing their targets by varying degrees. Our sensors indicate only a 68% direct hit rate. In comparison, Vex Thori weapons achieve 100% accuracy through targeted energy beams. Would you like to observe our artillery teams next?" Sarah offered, maintaining a professional demeanor despite the condescension in Cawthorn's tone. The demonstration continued as the lunar artillery batteries began their sequences. The Vex Thori observers watched with growing bewilderment as shells curved through the moon's low gravity, creating patterns they clearly found chaotic and unpredictable. "Most concerning," Cawthorn commented. "Your heaviest weapons appear to have the lowest accuracy. We could provide basic targeting assistance." "Thank you for the offer," Sarah interrupted politely. "But I assure you our teams are performing admirably." Cawthorn turned to confer with his fellow observers, their crystalline forms catching the starlight as they gestured at their data displays. None of them noticed the knowing looks exchanged between the human gunners, nor the careful way each miss was being logged and analyzed. "Perhaps," Cawthorn suggested diplomatically, "we could arrange a more detailed demonstration of Vex Thori military technology. Our targeting systems have been perfected over millennia." Sarah watched as another barrage of human artillery created a complex pattern of impacts across the lunar surface. To the aliens, it must have looked like scattered chaos. To her trained eye, it was a carefully choreographed dance of ballistic trajectories. "We would be honored," she replied, already formulating plans. "In fact, I'd like to propose a joint military exercise. A chance for both our species to learn from each other." The Vex Thori observer's crystalline form sparkled with what Sarah interpreted as enthusiasm. "An excellent suggestion. We would be pleased to demonstrate the superiority, that is, the advantages of our targeting technologies." As the preliminary agreement was made, Sarah noticed her artillery teams finishing their exercise. Their missed shots had created a perfect grid of impact points across the lunar surface, each one precisely spaced and recorded. The Vex Thori hadn't realized they were watching the creation of a detailed ballistic map. "Lieutenant Rodriguez," she said after closing the communication channel, "inform all unit commanders. Tell them to prepare for joint exercises and to keep recording their misses just as carefully." "Yes, Captain," Rodriguez replied with a knowing grin. "Should I tell them to demonstrate our poor aim during the joint exercise as well?" Sarah smiled as she watched the Vex Thori ships glittering against the stars. "Absolutely. Let's help our new friends understand that sometimes the best way to hit a target is to aim somewhere else entirely." The lunar surface below them was dotted with impact craters arranged in precise patterns that only made sense if you knew what you were looking for. The Vex Thori would learn soon enough. The Vex Thori flagship's dining hall gleamed like the inside of a diamond, its crystalline walls refracting light in mesmerizing patterns. Captain Sarah Chen sat at the long translucent table, surrounded by alien dignitaries whose faceted features caught and scattered the ambient light. The diplomatic dinner was meant to foster goodwill, but she could sense the undercurrent of superiority in every gesture from their hosts. "Your species shows remarkable adaptability," Cawthorn said, manipulating his eating utensils with precise movements. "Despite your technological limitations, you've managed to establish a significant presence in your solar system." Sarah took a careful sip from her water glass, noting how even their drinking vessels were designed to eliminate any possibility of spills or imprecise pouring. "We're quite proud of our achievements, yes. We've analyzed the data from your military exercises." Another Vexthori official chimed in, his crystalline form shifting colors slightly as he spoke. "Your weapon systems appear to operate significantly below their theoretical maximum efficiency. Statistical analysis suggests a 32% improvement would be possible with even basic Vexthori targeting systems," Cawthorn added, his tone carrying what he probably thought was generous concern. "We would be willing to share some of our older military technology as a gesture of friendship." Sarah placed her glass down with deliberate care. Around the table, she noticed other human officers managing to keep their expressions neutral, though she caught the slight twitch of Lieutenant Rodriguez's lip. "That's a generous offer," she replied, allowing a thoughtful pause before continuing. "Though I wonder if we might suggest an alternative approach to military cooperation." The Vexthori officials tilted their heads in unison, their crystalline bodies catching the light in a cascade of rainbow refractions. Cawthorn's central eye focused on her with increased intensity. "We are open to suggestions, Captain Chen." "A joint military exercise," Sarah proposed, reaching for her datapad. "Not just demonstrations, but actual tactical challenges. We could learn from each other's approaches, share techniques." She paused, then added with careful nonchalance, "Perhaps even make it a friendly competition." The aliens exchanged glances, their crystalline forms shimming with what Sarah had learned to recognize as amusement. "A competition." Cawthorn's voice carried a hint of what might have been excitement. "That would be enlightening. We could design a series of challenges," Sarah continued, beginning to sketch out parameters on her datapad. "Different terrains, various tactical scenarios. Both sides could demonstrate their full capabilities." "Full capabilities." One of the younger Vexthori officials leaned forward, his form prismatic with interest. "Including our Mark 7 energy targeting systems." "Of course," Sarah nodded. "And we'd demonstrate our full range of projectile weapons, including artillery and indirect fire systems." "Indirect fire." Cawthorn seemed to taste the words. "Ah yes, your tendency to launch projectiles in arcane trajectories. Very well, we accept this proposal. It will be most educational for your forces." Sarah transmitted the preliminary challenge parameters from her datapad to the main display. The crystalline walls of the dining hall caught the projection, multiplying it in fractalized patterns. "I've taken the liberty of drafting some initial scenarios. You'll notice I've included a variety of terrain types and combat conditions." The Vexthori officials studied the display, their bodies refracting light in patterns that suggested growing confidence. They clearly saw nothing in the proposed challenges that worried them. "This is acceptable," Cawthorn declared. "We will begin preparations immediately. Shall we say 3 solar days for the first challenge?" "Perfect." Sarah smiled, raising her glass in a toast. "To mutual learning and understanding." The Vexthori raised their glasses in return, the gesture precise and perfectly synchronized. None of them seemed to notice how the human officers' eyes gleamed with anticipation, or how their grins held just a touch of predatory patience. As they finished the diplomatic dinner, Sarah sent a brief message to her command staff. "Begin full tactical preparation. Let's show our new friends why humans spend so much time practicing missing." The crystalline walls sparkled with refracted light, like thousands of targets waiting to be engaged. directly or otherwise. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Nevada testing grounds as both human and Vexthori forces prepared for the first challenge. The desert air shimmered with heat, creating mirages that made the crystalline aliens seem to float above the sand. Captain Sarah Chen stood at the observation post, watching as the first targets were positioned across the range. "We will demonstrate first," Cawthorn announced, his form sparkling with confidence. "Observer Chen, please note the efficiency of our targeting systems." The Vexthori weapon platform hummed to life, its crystalline structure pulsing with internal energy. The alien gunner, a specialist named Telener, positioned himself at the controls with perfect posture. A series of targets appeared at varying distances, some stationary, others moving in complex patterns. The demonstration was impressive. Each energy blast struck dead center of each target, the precision almost mechanical in its perfection. No shot deviated by even a millimeter. The assembled human officers nodded appreciatively, their datapads recording every detail. 100% accuracy, Cawthorn declared, his crystalline form gleaming with pride. Zero deviation from intended impact points. "Now shall we observe your attempt?" Sarah gestured to her first team. Sergeant Maria Santos stepped forward with her squad, their conventional projectile weapons seeming almost primitive compared to the alien technology. The targets reset, and the human team took their positions. The first shots went wide, missing the targets by varying margins. Some landed short, others long. A few struck the ground at seemingly random points around the targets. The Vexthori observers shifted uncomfortably. "Perhaps the heat is affecting your targeting systems," Cawthorn suggested diplomatically. "We could pause to allow for recalibration." "No need," Santos replied, her eyes never leaving her datapad as she logged each impact point. "All shots are landing within expected parameters." The next round of fire produced similar results. To the aliens, it must have looked like chaos, shots landing everywhere except where they seemingly should. But Sarah noticed Santos' team exchanging subtle nods as they recorded each miss. "Most concerning," one of the Vexthori scientists commented. "Their accuracy appears to be deteriorating further." What the aliens didn't notice was the precise pattern emerging in the impact points. Each missed shot was carefully placed, building a comprehensive map of the terrain's ballistic properties. The humans weren't just shooting, they were conducting a detailed field study in real time. "Would you like to see our artillery demonstration next?" Sarah offered, watching Cawthorn's crystalline features shift in what she'd learned to recognize as discomfort. The heavy guns rolled into position. Lieutenant Rodriguez coordinated the fire mission, his commands crisp and confident. The shells arsed high into the desert sky, landing in a seemingly random pattern across the range. The Vexthori observers tracked each shot with their sophisticated sensors, their confusion growing with each impact that missed the designated targets. "Captain Chen," Cawthorn finally spoke, his tone carefully measured. "Your forces appear to be experiencing significant targeting difficulties. Are you certain you wish to continue?" Sarah smiled, watching as her teams continued recording data. "Absolutely certain, Observer Cawthorn. In fact, we're getting exactly the results we wanted." The alien official's crystalline form flickered with confusion. "But you haven't hit a single target directly." "No," Sarah agreed, her smile growing slightly. "We haven't." "Interesting, isn't it?" As the exercise continued, human teams methodically built their ballistic database, each carefully placed miss, adding to their understanding of the terrain. The Vexthori watched with a mixture of pity and bewilderment, completely missing the growing excitement among the human gunners. "Perhaps tomorrow's urban terrain exercise will prove more suitable for your capabilities," Cawthorn offered consolingly as the day drew to a close. Sarah watched the sun setting over the impact-scarred desert, each crater exactly where her teams had intended it to be. "Oh, I think tomorrow will be very suitable indeed. We've learned everything we needed to learn here." The aliens departed, still puzzling over the humans' apparent incompetence. Behind them, Sergeant Santos' team was already preparing their data for the next day's demonstration, their grins suggesting they knew something their alien observers had completely failed to grasp. The urban warfare training complex loomed before them, a maze of concrete buildings and narrow streets designed to simulate a city environment. Observation drones buzzed overhead as the morning briefing concluded, their cameras ready to capture every moment of the day's exercise. This environment presents interesting tactical challenges, Cawthorn observed, his crystalline form reflecting the early light. Our energy weapons excel at precision engagement in complex terrain. Sarah nodded, watching as the first Vexthori team took their positions. We're looking forward to your demonstration. The alien squad moved with fluid grace through the urban course. Their energy weapons hummed, sending precise beams through windows and doorways, striking each target with perfect accuracy, until they encountered their first properly fortified position. Curious, Telenor, the Vexthori weapons specialist, muttered as his beam splashed harmlessly against a reinforced barrier. The target appears to be completely protected from direct fire. Lieutenant Rodriguez, standing nearby with his datapad, spoke up. That's often the case in urban combat. Enemies tend to use available cover. The Vexthori team attempted several different angles, each shot perfectly aimed, yet unable to affect the protected targets. Their frustration manifested in subtle crystalline color shifts as they completed the course with several objectives unmet. A challenging scenario, Cawthorn admitted. Perhaps your teams would like to attempt it. Sarah gestured to Sergeant Santos and her squad. They moved into position, their conventional weapons seeming primitive compared to the alien technology. The first few shots went wide, ricocheting off walls and windows in seemingly random patterns. But then something changed. A grenade bounced off 3 surfaces before landing perfectly behind a barrier, neutralizing a protected target. A rifle shot ricocheted at a precise angle, taking out a target that hadn't been visible from any direct line of fire. Each missed shot seemed to have an unexpected secondary effect. Intriguing, one of the Vexthori scientists remarked, his crystalline form shifting to a deeper blue. Their projectiles appear to be following calculated rebound trajectories. Sarah watched as her teams worked through the course, their apparent misses creating increasingly complex patterns of ricochets and secondary effects. The aliens' confusion grew with each successful indirect engagement. Captain Chen. Cawthorn's voice carried a note of uncertainty. Your forces seem to be employing some form of targeting strategy we don't fully understand. Every environment has its own properties, Sarah replied cryptically, watching as another perfectly bounced grenade cleared a room that had stymied the Vexthori team. The trick is learning how to use them. The exercise continued, with human forces demonstrating increasingly complex indirect fire solutions. A shot that missed high struck a window, causing precisely calculated fragments to neutralize multiple targets. A grenade that appeared to fall short bounced up a stairwell, clearing an entire floor. Their accuracy is still poor, Telenor noted, though his tone carried less certainty now. But they are achieving unexpected results. Lieutenant Rodriguez smiled as he continued logging data. Accuracy is hitting what you're aiming at. Sometimes we're not aiming at what you think we are. The Vexthori observers huddled together, their crystalline forms shimmering with rapid color changes as they discussed the unexpected developments. Their sensors tracked each human projectile, trying to understand the patterns emerging from the apparent chaos. As the day drew to a close, Cawthorn approached Sarah with an almost hesitant manner. Captain, would it be possible to review your force's targeting data? We've noticed some unusual consistencies in their performance. Of course, Sarah replied with a diplomatic smile, though you might find it more interesting to analyze where we didn't shoot rather than where we did. The aliens departed for their ships, their usual confidence somewhat diminished. Behind them, Sergeant Santos handed Sarah a datapad showing the day's impact patterns. To the trained eye, it was a beautiful demonstration of calculated chaos, each miss contributing to an intricate web of indirect effects. Think they're starting to catch on, Captain. Rodriguez asked quietly. Sarah watched the crystalline ships shimmer in the evening light. They're beginning to ask the right questions. Tomorrow's forest exercise should really give them something to think about. Dense forest canopy created a shadowy maze across the training ground, morning mist still clinging to the branches. Captain Sarah Chen watched as the Vexthori observers studied the terrain with visible concern, their crystalline forms reflecting dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves. Our energy weapons require clear lines of sight, Cawthorn admitted, his usual confidence somewhat diminished. This environment presents certain complications. Nature rarely provides perfect shooting conditions, Sarah replied. Shall we begin the demonstration? The Vexthori team moved forward, their advanced sensors scanning for targets through the thick vegetation. Their first shots were perfectly aimed, as always, but the dense foliage absorbed or scattered their energy beams. Target after target remained untouched, protected by layers of leaves and branches. A young Vexthori scientist, Vertel, tracked each shot with increasing fascination. The energy dispersion patterns are unlike anything in our combat doctrine, she noted, her crystalline form shifting to deeper shades of blue with concentration. Perhaps your teams would like to attempt the course, Cawthorn suggested, trying to mask his frustration as another perfect shot dissipated harmlessly in the foliage. Sarah nodded to Lieutenant Rodriguez, who signaled the first human squad. They'd moved into position, their projectile weapons ready. The first volley appeared to miss wildly, shells arcing high above the canopy. Then the shells detonated. Calculated fragments rained down through precise gaps in the foliage. Branches swayed in carefully predicted patterns, creating temporary lines of sight. Each subsequent shot built upon the effects of the previous ones, turning the forest itself into a complex targeting computer. Fascinating, Vertel whispered, her crystalline form practically vibrating with excitement. They're using the natural movement of the vegetation. Each shot creates opportunities for the next. The human teams continued their demonstration, showing how indirect fire could navigate the three-dimensional maze of the forest. Grenades bounced off trees at precise angles. Shells created temporary clearings that other shots exploited, and careful timing turned swaying branches into predictable targeting solutions. Captain Chen, Vertel approached the observation post, her scientific curiosity overtaking military protocol. Your forces are calculating complex environmental interactions in real time. How is this possible without advanced targeting systems? Sarah smiled, gesturing to where Sergeant Santos was coordinating another intricate firing sequence. We've had thousands of years of practice dealing with indirect fire in difficult terrain. Every soldier learns to read the environment, to understand how their shots will interact with it. Cawthorn joined them, his crystalline form shifting through thoughtful colors. The previous exercises, your teams weren't missing at all, were they? No, Sarah confirmed. They were mapping patterns, understanding ricochet angles, learning how each surface and material would respond. Every missed shot was actually gathering data for moments like this. They watched as the human teams continued their demonstration. A shell that appeared to fall short struck a fallen log, causing it to roll in a precise direction, creating a chain reaction that exposed multiple hidden targets. Another shot clipped a tree branch at exactly the right angle to create a temporary gap in the canopy, which a follow-up shot immediately exploited. It's beautiful, Vertel breathed, her scientific detachment giving way to genuine admiration. Your species has turned indirect fire into an art form. Even Cawthorn seemed impressed now. We assumed perfect accuracy meant hitting exactly what you aim at. But you've shown us that sometimes the best path to a target isn't a straight line. The exercise concluded as the sun reached its zenith, shadows shifting through the forest canopy. The human teams had cleared every target, despite never having a direct line of sight to most of them. The Vexthori observers huddled together, their crystalline forms a kaleidoscope of excited colors as they discussed what they'd witnessed. Tomorrow's mountain phase will be even more interesting, Sarah mentioned casually to Cawthorn. Wait until you see what we can do with elevation changes and echolocation. The alien observer's crystalline form flickered with what might have been anticipation. "I suspect, Captain Chen, that we have only begun to understand what your species can do with missed shots." The mountain range stretched before them like a jagged wall, its peaks disappearing into low-hanging clouds. Wind whistled through the rocky terrain as Captain Sarah Chen led the observers to the designated viewing position. The Vexthori officials moved carefully across the uneven ground, their crystalline forms catching the morning light. Elevation changes add considerable complexity to targeting calculations, Cawthorne noted, his voice carrying a new tone of respect. "How do your forces compensate for the vertical variables?" Sarah smiled as she watched her artillery teams setting up their positions. "You'll see something interesting today. Lieutenant Rodriguez, begin the demonstration." The first Vexthori team took their positions, their energy weapons humming with power. Their initial volleys were perfectly accurate as always, striking visible targets with pinpoint precision. However, the mountain terrain proved challenging. Many targets were positioned behind rocky outcrops or in deep ravines, completely protected from direct fire. Vertel, the young Vexthori scientist, monitored her instruments with growing excitement. The acoustic properties of this terrain are remarkable. Each shot creates complex echo patterns. The human teams moved into position next. Their first barrage seemed to miss dramatically, shells impacting the mountainside well above the targeted areas. Cawthorne started to speak, then stopped as he watched the aftermath. The carefully placed impacts triggered precise rock slides, each cascade of debris following calculated paths down the mountainside. Targets that had been completely protected from direct fire were eliminated by the controlled chaos of falling rock and stone. "Extraordinary," Vertel whispered, her crystalline form shifting through shades of deep blue and purple. "They're using the mountain itself as a weapon." Sarah nodded to Sergeant Santos, who coordinated the next phase of the demonstration. The artillery teams began firing in synchronized patterns, their shells creating overlapping waves of impacts. Each explosion's echo bounced off the mountain walls in precisely calculated patterns, creating pressure waves that converged on hidden targets. "The acoustics," Cawthorne murmured, watching his sensor readings. "Your teams are using sound propagation for targeting." Rodriguez stepped forward, holding out his datapad. "Every environment has its own voice," he explained. "You just need to learn how to listen, and how to make it speak for you." The demonstration continued as human forces showed increasingly complex applications of indirect fire. A shell that appeared to miss by 100 meters struck a specific rock formation, splitting it in exactly the right way to redirect a stream's flow, washing out a hidden position. Another shot triggered a harmonic resonance in a natural rock arch, causing it to collapse at precisely the right moment. "Your species has developed an entirely different understanding of accuracy," Vertel observed, frantically recording data. "You don't see terrain as an obstacle to overcome, you see it as a tool to employ." Sarah watched as her teams executed their final sequence, a complex series of shots that used everything from wind patterns to geological stress points. Sometimes the most effective path to a target isn't the most obvious one. Cawthorne's crystalline form shifted to a deep, thoughtful green. "We believed our perfect accuracy represented the peak of targeting technology. But you've shown us that true accuracy isn't about hitting exactly what you aim at. It's about understanding how to achieve your objective through any means available." The exercise concluded as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the impact-scarred mountainside. The human teams had eliminated every target, despite never having direct lines of fire to most of them. The Vexthori observers gathered around their sensor displays, their forms shimmering with excitement as they analyzed the data. "Tomorrow's final challenge will be interesting," Sarah mentioned to Cawthorne. "The maze structure should give both our forces some unique opportunities to demonstrate their capabilities." The alien observer's crystalline form pulsed with what she now recognized as eager anticipation. "Indeed, Captain Chen. Though I suspect you already have several ideas about how to make the walls work for you rather than against you." Sarah's smile was answer enough. The mountains around them still echoed with the day's demonstrations, each crater and rockslide exactly where her teams had intended them to be. The maze facility rose from the desert floor like a metallic labyrinth, its walls gleaming under the morning sun. 3 stories of interconnected corridors, chambers, and barriers created a complex tactical environment that would challenge both species' combat doctrines. Captain Sarah Chen stood with the Vex-Thori observers on the control tower, reviewing the final exercise parameters. Multiple target types, varying levels of protection, and complete freedom of approach. Cawthorn summarized, his crystalline form reflecting thoughtfully. A comprehensive test of everything we've learned this week. Vertel adjusted her sensors, now specifically calibrated to track indirect fire patterns. The acoustic properties of the metal walls should create interesting opportunities for both teams. The Vex-Thori squad entered first, their energy weapons powered to maximum efficiency. They moved with practiced precision through the corridors, their perfect accuracy allowing them to engage any target they could see. But as with previous exercises, their direct fire approach left many objectives untouched, protected behind multiple layers of barriers. Interesting design, Lieutenant Rodriguez commented, monitoring the exercise. Every protected position has at least 3 potential indirect approach vectors. Sarah nodded to Surgeon Santos, signaling the start of the human demonstration. The first team entered the maze, but instead of following the Vex-Thori's methodical room-by-room approach, they began creating what appeared to be random impact patterns throughout the structure. They're mapping the resonance frequencies, Vertel realized, her crystalline form brightening with excitement. Each shot is testing how the structure conducts vibrations. The human teams coordinated their fire with increasing complexity. A shot that struck a wall panel created vibrations that traveled through the metal structure, weakening specific connection points. Another round used the newly weakened areas to redirect its force along calculated paths, reaching targets that seemed completely protected. Remarkable, Cawthorn breathed, watching as the humans turned the entire facility into an integrated targeting system. They're not just using individual ricochets anymore. They're treating the whole structure as a single targeting mechanism. Sarah smiled as her teams demonstrated increasingly sophisticated techniques. Grenades bounced through multiple corridors, their trajectories precisely calculated to use each impact to build momentum for the next. Artillery shells struck outer walls at specific angles, creating pressure waves that traveled through the structure's skeleton to converge on interior targets. Your forces have exceeded our initial assessments by several orders of magnitude, Cawthorn admitted, his crystalline form shifting through shades of respectful blue. We thought we were observing primitive weapons technology, but we were actually watching masters of physical manipulation. The exercise reached its climax as the human teams coordinated their most complex demonstration yet. Multiple shots struck different parts of the structure simultaneously, creating a cascading series of effects that cleared entire sections of the maze at once. The metallic walls sang with calculated impacts, each vibration and resonance working together in a carefully orchestrated symphony of indirect fire. It's like watching composers conduct an orchestra, Vertel observed, her scientific detachment giving way to pure admiration. Each shot is a note, and together they create a harmony of controlled destruction. As the final targets fell, the Vex-Thori observers gathered around their sensor displays, their crystalline forms shimmering with excitement as they analyzed the intricate patterns the humans had created. The maze structure stood as a testament to their demonstration, each impact mark telling part of a larger story about the art of indirect warfare. I believe, Cawthorn said formally, turning to Sarah, we owe your species an apology. We mistook complexity for primitiveness and precision for perfection. You've shown us that true mastery lies in understanding all the ways to reach a goal, not just the most obvious path. Sarah watched as her teams began their post-exercise analysis, already preparing for tomorrow's final phase. Sometimes the best way to learn is to start by admitting you don't know everything. The setting sun cast long shadows through the maze structure, each mark and dent exactly where it needed to be, part of a larger pattern that only became clear when you knew what you were looking for. The closing ceremony took place in a vast hangar, sunlight streaming through high windows to illuminate both human and Vexthori delegations. Captain Sarah Chen stood at the podium, facing an audience that now viewed humanity's capabilities in a very different light than they had a week ago. "Our joint exercises have proven enlightening for both species," she began, her voice carrying across the attentive crowd. "We've learned that different paths can lead to the same destination, and that perfection comes in many forms." Cawthorn stepped forward, his crystalline form radiating dignified respect. "The Vexthori High Command has reviewed all exercise data and reached an unprecedented decision. We formally request to establish a permanent military exchange program, with human instructors teaching indirect fire techniques to our forces." A murmur of appreciation ran through the assembled officers. Vertel, practically vibrating with scientific excitement, projected a holographic display of the week's most impressive demonstrations. The gathered aliens watched in fascination as the replay showed human forces turning seemingly random shots into precisely choreographed sequences of cause and effect. "Our first lesson," Sarah announced, gesturing to Sergeant Santos, "will begin with understanding that every miss is an opportunity to learn. Lieutenant Rodriguez, would you demonstrate?" Rodriguez stepped up to a simple target range set up for the occasion. His first shot went wide, striking a precisely placed metal plate. The ricochet took out the target from behind, causing the Vexthori observers to pulse with appreciative colors. "To master indirect fire," Santos explained, "you must first learn to see beyond the obvious path. Every surface is a potential ally, every obstacle a possible tool." The demonstration continued as human instructors showed their alien counterparts the basics of calculating ricochets, understanding material properties, and reading terrain features. The Vexthori, their perfect accuracy now tempered with new understanding, began their first tentative experiments with intentionally missing. "Remarkable," Cawthorn commented to Sarah, as they watched a young Vexthori officer successfully bounce a shot off 3 surfaces. "We spent millennia perfecting our ability to hit exactly what we aim at. You've shown us that sometimes the best shot is the one that appears to miss." Vertel approached with a stack of data crystals, her form shimmering with academic enthusiasm. "We've begun cataloging human indirect fire techniques. The mathematical models are beautifully complex, yet your forces seem to calculate them instinctively." "Practice," Sarah smiled. "Lots and lots of practice, and a willingness to learn from every shot, especially the ones that don't go where you initially intended." The ceremony concluded with the signing of the formal exchange agreement. Human instructors would be assigned to Vexthori units, while alien technical advisors would help integrate their sensor technology with human indirect fire techniques. It was a partnership that would transform both species' approaches to combat. "One last question, Captain Chen," Cawthorn asked as the crowd began to disperse. "That first day, when we observed your lunar artillery exercise, you knew exactly what you were doing, didn't you?" Sarah's smile widened slightly. "Every shot in that exercise landed exactly where we intended it to land. We weren't missing the targets. We were building a comprehensive ballistic map of the entire training area." The alien observer's crystalline form shifted to a deep, appreciative blue. "You taught us something profound, Captain. True accuracy isn't about never missing. It's about understanding all the ways to achieve your objective." As the sun set on the final day of the exercise, human and Vexthori officers mingled freely, exchanging ideas and techniques. The target range echoed with the sounds of practice shots, some hitting directly, others taking more creative paths to their destinations. To precise misses, Rodriguez raised a toast, surrounded by both human and alien colleagues. "And to learning that the best path forward," Sarah added, "isn't always a straight line." The gathered officers, their forms both solid and crystalline, raised their glasses in agreement. Above them, the first stars began to appear, twinkling like distant targets waiting to be reached, directly or otherwise.